Shout with joy to God all the earth.
Sing to the glory of his name.
Offer him glory and praise.
Sing to the glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the glory of his
Sing
name.
to the
Sing to the glory of his name.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Devoratorium. My name is Darnay DeVore, and I'm going to be your host. On today's episode, it's not fair. Do you ever believe that life just isn't fair? What is fair for you? Think this through. Is it to have as much money or as much opportunity or as much happiness as someone else? Are you judging what is fair by someone else? Let me ask this. How many of us can actually conceive of something being fair, even if in the situation that we're conceiving of, we lose? We come out on the bottom. Would that still be fair? How many of us can conceive that? Today, we're going to look at some biblical examples of situations that I'm sure we're both going to agree they just aren't fair. We're going to start with Genesis chapter 4. We're going to meet Cain and Abel. Yeah, brothers and sons of Adam and Eve. In verse 3 through 7, we read that Cain and Abel presented their sacrifices to God. Abel's sacrifice was accepted, but Cain's sacrifice was rejected. Now, Cain was upset about this, but God told him, do what is right. I'm just paraphrasing this, but do what is right and your sacrifice will be accepted. Okay? So by verse 8, Cain killed his brother Abel. When you drop down to verse 17, we see that Cain got married and he built a city. Abel was killed by his own brother for doing right by God. Abel never got a chance to get married, to have children, or even grandchildren, okay? Abel never got a chance to have a city of his own like Cain did. Was this fair to Abel? Did Cain actually get away with murder? Our second situation comes from 2 Samuel chapter 11, where we're going to see King David and Uriah the Hittite. In verse 2 through 5, King David sees Bathsheba, whose husband Uriah the Hittite is away at war on behalf of Israel. David sleeps with her and she gets pregnant. In verse 6 through 13, David summons Uriah the Hittite from battle, to convince him to sleep with his wife to hide the fact that she was already pregnant. It would be assumed as Uriah's child, but Uriah the Hittite was too loyal to David and Israel during battle to enjoy such pleasures with his wife. So in verse 14 through 27, David plots to have Uriah killed in battle so he can marry Bathsheba himself, and thus their child would look legitimate in everyone's eyes. Let me ask the question. Uriah the Hittite was killed in battle by his own king. Uriah never got a chance to have his own children with his wife, watch them grow, and continue enjoying his fellowship with Israel as a convert. Uriah the Hittite was a convert to Israel. He was a Hittite, but he was a convert to this holy nation of God called Israel. David continued to rule Israel, had kids, more kids with Bathsheba, and he had grandkids. Did King David get away with murder? How is this fair at all to Uriah the Hittite? The third biblical example we're going to look at is Luke chapter 16, where we're going to meet the rich man and Lazarus. In verse 19 through 21, we have a rich man with everything a person could ask for and more. And we have Lazarus, who's a poor beggar and stricken with illness. Lazarus was at the rich man's gates and just wanted to eat crumbs from the rich man's table. In verse 22 through 31, they both died, and in death, we discovered the rich man had no faith, as evident by his life choices and disregard for the poor. So he went to torment after he died. Lazarus was rich with faith, so he went to paradise with Abraham. The rich man became the beggar and ended up just begging for water in torment. And Lazarus was blessed. Their fortunes switched after death. We're going to take a look at Luke 16, verse 25, as the rich man is asking Abraham for water, begging Abraham to send Lazarus to bring him some water, a drop of water for his tongue. Luke 16:25, it reads, "But Abraham replied, 'Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony.'" We have to understand something here. Life is not always going to be fair. It's just not. That's not what the Bible teaches, whether you believe in God or not. As a matter of fact, if you believe in God, chances are most of the time your life won't be fair. Okay? But the lesson we learn from Abel, Uriah the Hittite, and Lazarus is not to worry about making things fair or enacting some type of justice, because God was, and always has been in control. Cain was punished for what he did. King David was punished, and the rich man, they were all punished, but the victims of their crimes or their situations, they never saw the punishments of these folks. Never did. Okay? Lazarus was dead. Uriah the Hittite was dead, and Abel they were all dead. They never saw what happened to the people who filled their life with such pain and anguish and betrayal. Just because these men did not see the punishments given out to the men who were unfair to them doesn't mean that God did not deliver that justice on their behalf. Let's consider Jesus for a moment. Life wasn't fair for Jesus either. So why should we expect any more for us, that life should be fair for us? He was God the Son who became a man, not for his sake, but for ours. Now, let me ask you something. Was that fair for him to give up his deity? Let's take a look at Philippians 2:5-8. It reads, "In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross." God became flesh and humbled himself to die on the cross for our sin. Jesus lived a relatively short life, dying in his early 30s. He too never got a chance to get married, have kids, watch them grow, own a big home, start his own business, etc. He came to the very people who were waiting for him, and he was rejected. John 1:11. He was put on a cross to die for sins that he never even committed. 2 Corinthians 5:21. So if we want things to be fair, if we really, truly want things to be fair, we should be on the cross, dying for our own sin because we deserve it, we earned it. Now, aren't you glad in retrospect things aren't fair? We tend to forget that if everything were fair, we would be eternally and deservedly separated from God because of our sin. We've got to resolve that life will not be as fair as we want it to be. Sometimes things will go our way, sometimes they won't. If they don't go our way, should we curse God for the unfairness in our lives? Should we reject God altogether for not blessing us with a better life? Or should we be thankful for this life, brief and unfair as it may be, and use it to serve God no matter what? We don't really want fair. We are better off with faith, the faith of the sufficient grace of God. This brings me to Paul, the Apostle Paul. He's working for God himself. He's teaching and preaching just as he's told. But Paul has a thorn in his side. Whatever that thorn is, we're not told. But whatever it is uncomfortable for Paul. Uncomfortable enough for him to ask God no less than 3 times to please remove this thorn from his side. Wouldn't it be fair for God to remove that thorn from Paul's side so Paul can do his job better? Let's find out what God said in 2 Corinthians 12:9-10. "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Paul delights in the things that we consider unfair. This is just how God works. He is glorified even in our weaknesses and things that are difficult, like unfair situations. He's glorified. The grace of God is given unfairly, mind you, for wicked people who do not deserve it. Being fair means I have earned an eternal death, Romans 6:23. For me, I'll take grace over fair any day. So consider these things today. It's not fair. I get it. The next time you're in a situation that isn't fair, and it probably won't be fair, I want you to expand your mind, open your mind a little bit more, and consider Jesus Christ. Consider the grace given by God himself through faith in his son, Jesus Christ. That grace, it gets you eternity in heaven, even though none of us deserve it. The grace of God is unfairly given to you and to me. That should bring a smile to our face, and no matter what situation in our lives are not fair, we still smile because God's grace is sufficient. I want to thank everybody for joining me today. Stay tuned for the next video.